Hello, everyone. Welcome to our first live stream here on our Facebook group for Avant More Learning. My name is Dawn Samples, and today we're excited to bring to you our guest presenter speaker. He's just going to talk with us today, Carl Falsgraf. Before we get started, I just wanted to share a few things with you so that everyone knows what we're going to do and how this is going to work. You guys can comment in the chat if you would. Please introduce yourselves. Tell us who you are, where you're joining us from. And we have some help in the chat today. Anna Hearing, who works with us at Avant Assessment, is going to be helping to moderate the chat with you guys today. So you guys can say hello to Anna while she's in the chat. We are going to be while we're waiting for people to kind of pile into the chat, we're going to be telling you a little bit about some of the resources. Anna's going to post some things in the chat for you about our Avant Assessment website, about our Avant More Learning website. If you haven't already joined our Avant More Learning Facebook group, please do that so that you can know when we have live events and what else is coming up. We do webinars and other kinds of things that we always post information about in our Facebook group, and some other ways that you can follow us through some resources and other links that she's going to share. So make sure you check that out in the chat. And also wanted to let you guys know that we're going to have a giveaway today. So today we're going to be giving away 5 stamp tests to people who are participating in today's live with us. And these tests will be for you so that you can take the test and then go for your global seal of biliteracy. So there will be a link for you where you can join us. Ask us for information or let us know that you were one of the winners, and we'll tell you more about how to win in just a little while. And we're also going to have an advanced training giveaway for a month free of advance with an option to extend that license if you want to. And so that also is going to be one of our giveaways. But you do have to participate in today's event so that we know that you're there. And if you would, please like and share this event so that others can join you, colleagues, whomever, and participate with us today. So one way that you can participate also is to find out a little bit more about our guest today. If you click on the blog link that Anna has shared, you'll be able to see a link and some information about Carl Falsgraf, who is our guest. And that will give you some background information. One of our more team members, Mana, met with Carl and wrote up a great piece about him called The Seeker. So for those of you who are out there who know Carl, when you read that, you'll see him in that piece. It's a nice article that Mona wrote for us. So I'm going to ask Carl if he would come on and join us now so that he can participate in our discussion. Hello, Carl.
Hey there, great to see you, and I can't see everybody out there, but I know you're there, and it's wonderful to get reconnected, at least virtually, with a lot of my old friends. So.
Yes. So we are going to have Anna kind of sharing with us. If you guys have questions for Carl or for me, or you just want to know, I'm trying to, as soon as we kind of get started, I'm trying to also follow along in this conversation with you virtually. So I'm operating like 10 different devices. So you guys, if I get confused, this is the first time we've done a live on Facebook. So I'm just putting that out there. I feel like I'm in like NASA control command center over here. So Carl, today we are going to be talking about the title of our talk today is called Phoenix Rising, Leveraging the Crisis to Create Opportunity. And we're going to be focusing our discussion around primarily like where we've come before we hit COVID, what happened when we hit COVID and the lockdowns, and then what does this mean for us for the future? So that's going to be what frames our discussion today, but a lot of people maybe haven't seen or heard from you in a while. So do you want to first just tell us a little bit about what you've been doing?
I have sort of flown off the radar a little bit. As many of you know, I was the founder and director of the Center for Applied Second Language Studies, CASLS, for about 20 years. And I left just about seven, almost 8 years ago now in 2013. And sort of, reinvented my life. And my life after CASLS started within a month after leaving. Being the workaholic that I am, I knew that if I stayed in town, people would probably call me up and I would inevitably get dragged back into all sorts of things. So I jumped in my 1998 Toyota Tacoma pickup truck and I drove all around the country for 49 days. I had no destination. I had no timeline. After, again, well, more than 20 years, 30, 35 years in the field, it was hard to imagine not having places to be and meetings and budgets and all that kind of stuff. So I sort of went cold turkey and drove around the country for 49 days, visited maybe a few of you who are out there on my travels. And when I got back, so many people wanted to hear about my trip. I got the idea of writing a book about it because so many people dream of doing something like that. So I did.
Yeah.
It's called Highway Blues. And so I wrote that book and I published that. And that sort of, got me into my post-CASLS life. Since then, I've been really focused on a lot of community activities, especially after the 2016 election. I really did some reflection on what's going on in our culture and our society. And it seemed to me a lot of it came down to a lack of community and a lack of connection between people. So I've
Mm.
been very involved in homeless issues here in Eugene. I've been very involved with the music community, um, bringing people together largely around music and around some of those issues that face this particular community. So it's been really interesting to me in a way because the nature of our job as world language teachers is to be looking outward, right? And for me, it was Japan, it was the whole world, and then after I left CASLS, it became very inward looking in terms of being in this little community of about 150,
Mm.
200,000 people.
It's a big
And
change.
it was a huge change. And
Yeah.
it's really, in a way, it's really nice having that sense of place and so forth. But I haven't totally left the language field. I've taught some graduate classes at the U of O on an interim basis. I've been working with the immersion schools here in Eugene. I worked a lot with Michael Bacon up in Portland as a consultant, and now I'm doing a lot of work with Avant. So I'm keeping my hand in the language biz. It's just not all day, every day the way that it used to be. So that in
Yeah,
a
I don't know if I
nutshell is what
believe that.
it
In a nutshell. So you guys can see Carl has stayed busier than ever. And I have just loved being able to reconnect with him. I worked with him for so many different years, for many years on different projects, but to be able to reconnect and work on some projects with you with Avant's been a joy for me. And I know I've had some text messages from different people this morning who were so excited they were going to get to see you today and hear from you again because they haven't heard from you in a while. So some of them are joining in the chat. And so after this is over, you'll get a chance to go through and read all those greetings and comment back with them if you want to. But let's go ahead and get started in our discussion. And Anna is going to be sharing with you guys in the chat some questions. I know yesterday we posted some questions for reflection for you guys to kind of be thinking about in terms of your own experience and where you are in your role, whatever it may be. Maybe you are a teacher or an administrator. If you're watching this later and you want to comment and participate, please feel free to, even if it's not during our live, you can hit replay and watch it. But if you are even a community member, or maybe you're a retired educator and you, like Carl, have stayed busy and active and part of things, or maybe you haven't, some of the questions that Anna is going to share with you are just to kind of help you think about what has really worked, what didn't work, what could we do to change when we go back, how we go back, will we go back to normal? Will that even happen? So no, Carl and I have had some discussion before this live event around some things. And he, of course, those of you who know Carl, is a very deep thinker, and he's had some thoughts and reflections that he's going to kickstart the conversation with. And then we'll start to engage with you as you guys will just go ahead and post some of the things you've been thinking about. That will be awesome. Okay, so Carl, to visit a little bit some of our discussion, I know you were thinking about some ways that things like this have happened in the past in history. So talk to us a little bit about that.
Well, the real thing that I saw a quote by Winston Churchill, who said, "A good crisis, never waste a good crisis," and he knew a lot about crises. And uh, then I sort of looked through history, and really, if you look, whenever there's been a huge upheaval in society, it's been followed by a huge flowering of creativity. So after the Black Plague in the 14th century, along came the Renaissance. Art and politics and literature, everything just exploded. After the Civil War in this country, we had African American music was like just unleashed, and you had Walt Whitman and you had Mark Twain. So our
Mhm,
literature finally had this American kind of a literature happening after World War II, right? There was all this technological development and rock and roll and all this stuff happened. So it seems like when we are forced out of our comfort zone, even with something horrible like a war or a pandemic, it's the nature of a resilient culture that we then have this flowering of creativity. And I really wanted to think, and we talked about this a lot. What is that going to mean for education? What have we
mhm,
learned in the middle of this horrible pandemic that's forced us to do things we didn't want to do, we shouldn't have ever had to do, but for better or worse,
mhm.
here we are. Now, what can we take from that so
Yeah.
that we have the equivalent of a renaissance in the language teaching business, or the equivalent of a flowering of literature or something? And that's sort of where I started.
Yeah, it makes me think of an article I read recently, and I can share the article with our participants later about how COVID has created engineers out of teachers. We've had to re-engineer what we do and be innovative and creative in ways that we've never had to do it before, and maybe might never have actually done to the degree that we've had to in education. I mean, I would venture to say that for many years there have been a lot of districts that have been on the edge of massive major change, but there are always certain infrastructures in place that you just can't break through,
Right.
um, because of our system and how it's just been like this for forever.
Right.
And I think COVID broke a lot of things, destroyed it, just obliterated it. And so my hope is that we can take that as an opportunity.
Yeah.
I think we've already started rebuilding things in a whole different way out of necessity,
Mhm.
and not everyone likes where we are. Um, but I just have to wonder, um, even the things that we're not comfortable with now, it doesn't mean that it has to stay that way forever.
Right.
But we
And
could maybe learn from
there's
that.
there's some things we'll probably never should be comfortable with, right? That lack of
Mm-hmm,
direct student contact, and especially with the little kids, being able to give them a hug or wipe their tears or something. I mean, it's terrible. We
mm-hmm,
can't get to do that, right? So I'm certainly not saying, oh, wasn't this a great thing? But okay, it happened, right? And as you say, teachers, we've always been improvisers. We've always been engineers, and this has forced a lot of us to do some things that we might not have been comfortable with, and now have to do. So a couple things that came to my mind, and in talking with some teachers, I think people figured out how to do this. One is differentiated learning. And in a classroom where you've got to keep, it's you have to control your classroom. It's classroom management, right? It In a way
mm-hmm,
you can do that. I don't want to say more easily. You're almost forced to do that when you've got kids in little boxes on Zoom, and some of them turn their cameras off and so forth, right? So you're just not going to keep the attention, especially of the little guys, for very long. And I think a lot of teachers have learned, if I, give a task, work on it, come back and share, and not everybody has to be doing the same thing at the same time. So that seems to
mm-hmm,
me, I'm going to guess a lot of us have found that some kids are really taken to this well, and they've done some really creative things, whether it's making videos that they can then post with the share screen feature or something like that. That may be something we don't want to throw out when we get back to whatever the new normal is going to be. Uh,
mm-hmm.
Well, that's one thing, and especially I think now as language teachers, now that we've kind of, for better or worse, broken through that barrier. And again, there's a lot of district policies that prevent us from doing this. I would say, oh no, you can't get on the internet. The kids might run into something that they shouldn't see. Okay. And we still have to be careful about that. We still have to be mindful of safety. But, now we've broken through that barrier. Kids are online, for school, they're online for everything in their lives. And there is a whole world of name your language, Spanish, Japanese, Chinese, Arabic material out there. And if
Hmm.
we can do a good job, and I know some teachers have in the midst of this crisis, do a good job of saying, okay, go find an advertisement for you name it, right? Find an advertisement for something in Japanese and tell me if you'd want to buy this or not. And the kids can go and they can find things that are interesting to them. Some might want to find things for clothes and fashion. Others might want to find tickets for soccer games. Somebody might want to find something else, right? So it's really forcing us to get out and access those authentic materials and access native speakers too, right? Now we're used to talking
Hmm.
to each other on Zoom. You know, distance is not an issue anymore.
Exactly. I think the comfort level that teachers have now in terms of engaging with their learners, truly not losing, but using technology for learning because there's no other way to learn except through the technology has sort
Mhm.
of put that whole idea on its head. But a lot of times, as a district supervisor, I often found that my teachers were some of the most tech savvy in the district because for them that was the window to the world, that was how they were able to connect and access authentic documents and resources and people to engage with. And I think that sometimes in programs where I work with different teachers where they haven't had a one-to-one adoption for students until COVID, it was really hard for them to turn that learning over to the learners so the learners could have ownership in that and explore and learn what they want to learn for how they want to learn language. But now we've almost had to have a one-to-one everywhere
Yeah,
or we were leaving kids behind.
yeah.
And so districts had to, and through some very difficult times, make very difficult decisions about how to get devices in kids' hands. And teachers have to learn after the fact in the heat of the moment how to manage that, and that was not fun at all. But I think that it has put us that it's catapulted us into a different place than where we were before.
That's a really interesting point about the control. And I think, those of us who went through the traditional school system thought, well, if I'm a good teacher, I've got to keep the kids quiet and they have to be, on task. And these are all good things and so forth. But now being forced to cede control to students because of the pandemic, I mean, really, those kids really, whenever they wanted to, they could just turn off their camera, right? There's not a whole
Yeah.
lot we could do to stop them. Okay. Whereas in the classroom, they can't just get up and leave, or we give them detention or something like that, right? So, and we have lost some kids through that because not every kid is able to control themselves. So, I'm not suggesting anarchy here, but there are some places where I think even when we get a whole classroom full of kids back in front of us, we don't have to keep that, at least that iron grip of control, right?
Mm-hmm.
We have to be the guide. We have to be saying, okay, we are going towards this common goal, but we don't all have to be working on the same worksheet at the same time. It could be different groups exploring
I
different
think
things, right?
COVID, yeah, yanked control out of our hands, like
Whether we like it or not.
whether we wanted it to or not. Like we
Yeah,
lost control of a lot of things.
yeah.
So for better or worse, that may not have been such a bad thing. We have a comment from one of our participants, Natalie, and actually know Natalie. She is an elementary immersion teacher. One of the things that she says here is that students have struggled a lot in reading, and the parents are very worried about how this is impacting their performance and the gaps that they are experiencing because of COVID and maybe not having access to as much direct interaction and engagement with the language,
Mhm.
and that teachers are looking for strategies to help the students that may be struggling after a long period of quarantine. Um, and that some of them have lost their confidence to speak, which I could see where that would be a struggle as well.
Yeah, it was interesting as you were saying about the reading. I thought, well, what's better for this sort of, forced differentiated learning, whatever we want to call it, than reading? I mean, reading is intrinsically a private internal cognitive activity. And obviously, if we're leading a kid through another language, we have to be very cognizant about getting the right kind of text and directing them through that text and so forth. But that's a
Mm-hmm.
great example of where we could cede a little bit of control and say, okay, I've got a dozen different texts here. Some of them have to deal with fashion, and some of them have to deal with politics, and some of them have to deal with, dating in Venezuela or whatever it is. And you can
Or
choose
science, if
science,
it's
whatever.
immersion, whatever it may be.
It depends.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's right. I think you said Natalie was an immersion teacher. So, but yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, depending on what your level is and so forth, and you can give kids that choice because it's an internal activity. And just as you can say, turn off your camera, read this, and then come back and put something in the chat in 5 minutes, we can do that when we go back live in the classroom, right? So reading seems to me something that, maybe naturally we might have gotten some good ideas on how to do that. Yeah, I absolutely agree with the speaking. That's one thing that's, so difficult to do. With some sort of Zoom thing, especially because I know a lot of
Yeah,
districts have policies. You can't have a breakout room, or you don't want kids in
right.
pairs and all this sort of thing. So that makes it even more difficult. On the other hand, and again, we probably have to, get past the crisis to get to this point. Now that administrators, I hope, have realized, horrible things don't always happen when kids are talking to each other on Zoom or whatever the platform is. um, we could set up some opportunities for talking with speakers who aren't in our school. I mean, we've already
Mm-hmm.
obliterated distance as an issue. So, if we can set up the right kind of language exchange, it could be either speakers in this country, speakers in another country. That seems to me something that we could bring to the classroom. And again, but we have to
Mm-hmm.
see a little bit of control, because if we've got a number of kids or groups of kids talking with different uh, people on different pieces of
Mm-hmm.
technology, the teacher cannot be everywhere at once.
Yeah.
So we do
And
have
that
to
kind
set
of
that up.
speaks a little bit to a comment and a question we have from Angela Davila has
Hi,
a
Angela.
question. Teachers have gained unusual access to the personal lives of students. And this is something you and I talked about the other day. Zoom has them directly into the homes of students. How do teachers respect students' privacy while at the same time draw on the diversity of their students and utilize this access into special conversations and world language communication activities? So how can we flip that into an opportunity versus a challenge or an obstacle?
So if I understand that right, it's how do we do that while we're still in this remote environment? And that
Like
is,
respect the privacy, but also
yeah,
celebrate the diversity.
yeah, so celebrating the diversity. And it's a very one of the to me one of the very saddest things about COVID is that we as teachers are obligatory reporters, and we don't and if you don't see a kid in the flesh, sometimes you miss really important things. On the other hand, you may also see really important things, as Angela pointed out, going on in the background, whether that's, siblings who are running around out of control. You have an idea about the home environment. Is it ordered? Is it chaotic? And so forth. Um, and yes, I don't think it's not appropriate to point out. It's like, oh, gee, we see your brother's smoking cigarettes in the back. That must be really bothering you or something. But um, it does seem to me that we can, bring things from home life where it is appropriate. It might be, sharing things that you've been eating, sharing games you've been playing, uh, you know,
Mm-hmm.
what do you do in your off time? That could be one of those, again, differentiated assignments.
Mm-hmm.
Bring an object that's in your house that you want to share. It's like show and tell, right? And
Yeah.
tell us about this in Spanish, in Japanese, in Chinese, whatever. And that gives the
Yeah.
kid, again, the kid's got the control, right? And that doesn't seem to me to be invading the privacy if the kid gets to choose his or her favorite toy or his or her favorite book. It might even be a sibling, and I want to
Hmm.
introduce my little sister, and here's
Right.
this, and here's what
You
she's
don't have to do
into.
it through slides anymore. You can say,
That's
so
right.
this is my mother and this is my
Yeah,
father, and actually
yeah,
do it.
yeah.
I know I saw a thing the other day where teachers were talking about some of the ways that, you know, you we know that students are more likely to take a risk with the language when they feel safe and they feel safe in the learning environment. For a lot of students, that safe place is in the building at school. For many students, they're safe at home. Others, unfortunately, don't feel safe at home. And the lifeline they have may be with that teacher. Um, but being able to see that into that window of where the student is living or coming from can help us better understand how to support the student, like you said, and provide differentiated experiences for the student. But I do think it opens a lot of doors as well, that maybe even after we're back full time, having an opportunity to have Zoom calls or things like that where you can engage with the home or with the family. Or if you're going to do cooking in class, instead of it just being you cooking in class, if your students are old enough to cook, like maybe everyone sets up in their kitchen and cooks together and does a cook along, or
Yeah.
a painting or whatever it may be, a read along. um,
Yeah.
so I think the way that we can engage may be quite different, while at the same time doing some of the same things that we've done before, just in a whole different.
Yeah.
We
And
have a
maybe
comment.
I was going to
Oh,
say,
go
just
ahead.
maybe before we go, just turn that on its head a little bit. It can work the other way. The teacher can also, instead of having a background like this, right? The teacher can turn off that background, and now all of you can, see my little
See into your
study
home.
here, right? And here's where I am, and I think if a teacher shows this is how I live, and a lot of us have lived in other countries, right? Actually, I'm not going to bother right now, but I've got a piece of Japanese calligraphy right here on the wall, right? So I bring Japan into my home. I ate some Japanese food.
Mm-hmm.
That, again, it shows students a different way, a different aspect of you as a person. And we've always, language teachers particularly, we're models, right? We're linguistic models, but we can also be cultural models as well.
Yeah. So Michelle Aoki, I know you know Michelle.
Hello,
Um,
Michelle.
she also has a comment. She said, "Good point about reading. Might that be true about listening too? This could be an opportunity to expand access to hearing different things, different speakers. Sometimes in normal times, students get limited to hearing from their teacher." And to piggyback on what she said real quick, also, I know that for us, many times our data, when we would when we would do stamp testing, a lot of times listening was the area that needed the most work and the most support.
Hmm.
And so a hybrid environment, I think, might provide more opportunities because you can connect with the world and with native speakers
Hmm.
and have teachers, students hear other voices and accents than just their teacher in a whole
Yes.
different way.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And again, I understand, COVID sort of forced it forced us to do this so quickly. We didn't have a lot of time to step back and reimagine the quote unquote
Mm-hmm.
classroom, right? But there are
Right.
no, for most of us, there are no classrooms or have been no classrooms, right? So we don't necessarily have to say, well, this is the second year Spanish classroom and we talk to each other because we're all in second year Spanish. You could get a fourth year kid in there to talk about, whatever that kid wants to talk about. That kid practices their presentational skills. The second year students or
Mm-hmm.
third year students below them get to practice their listening skills and maybe, ask a few questions afterwards, right? So, it again, now that we've broken that barrier and said we don't all have to just stay in second year Spanish from 1:15 until 2:37, right? If we break through that, and we have broken through that, now maybe we can have some more peer interaction,
Mhm.
peer support, modeling, that sort of thing too. So,
Well,
yeah,
and that makes me think. I know some models, every district has its own model. Like there's my mind's been blown at
yes,
all the
yeah,
different
yeah,
models that there are
yeah,
out there. Some literally have the same thing as face to face. It's just virtual. So it's like a bell, right? Others have completely asynchronous and they don't even engage live with their teachers. I mean, it's just the full gamut. Others see their teachers face to face 2 days a week and then they're virtual 2 days a week. And there's so many different models of it. But I think that your point is well taken that even after we get back to face, the chances are pretty high that we're going to continue to have this rolling quarantining of students being virtual because maybe they have to be home for 14 days or 7 days or whatever it may be. So we don't just want the learning to stop, right? So we're going to have to continue to incorporate that virtual aspect into everything we do, I think,
mhm,
from here out. So there are no more walls or locations that you could conceivably collaborate cross levels and have, oh my gosh, competency based grouping
yeah.
or progression and articulation as well, which is something that in our previous structures prohibited us from doing that. And maybe some of those structures are blown out now where we can do more
Yeah.
learning in that kind of
Well, and you brought up a
scenario.
scenario where again we're forced to, again, if that kid's in quarantine, we don't want the kid to just miss 2 weeks of school. Okay, so you bring the kid in. Well, that's because we have to. But what about if we want to? Because there's a heritage speaker of Spanish who's also quarantined. Well, he maybe goes to his ESL class and his math class, and then, hey, we want you to log on to the third year Spanish class, and they want to interview you about, whatever, something like that. So,
Mm-hmm,
again, once my, what I keep coming back to here is once you kind of burst that bubble and you get out,
mm-hmm.
it's not just a band-aid, right? It's not just a bug. Now it can be a
Yeah.
feature, right? And let's make it a
Right. Now
feature.
it's actually an advantage. It's no longer figuring it out. It's more of a feather in your hat to be able to do and keep moving and keep that approach new and different and live.
And especially for us
We
in languages. I mean, I think I'm sure math teachers have come up with some really good ideas, and writing teacher, English teachers and so forth. But we're about engaging with the world. And for most of us, not all of us, the world that we're trying to teach is not right outside. It's certainly not in our classroom. It may not even be in our community. As a Japanese teacher, it's very
right.
rarely in a community, right? I would love to be
Yeah.
able to break that barrier, get some Japanese
Mm-hmm.
speakers, some authentic materials, web thing, be texting back and forth with kids in Japan, whatever. That just, opens up a whole range of communicative activities that we haven't been able to do largely because of policies and lack of imagination. And getting back to our theme, this has forced us to use our imagination and maybe relook at some of those policies that kept us from engaging with the world the way we can.
Right. We've got a strategy. Well, Natalie is sharing again. She said one of the activities I encourage the students to do is share Google Slides in the language. Students choose the topic they want to share and prepare a presentation. They share and enjoy it a lot by sharing their thinking. And in the meantime, she's able to support writing and reading skills. So it's very student centered and student driven.
Yes,
Um, and they're practicing their skills. And
that's
we also
exactly it. Yeah.
have, yeah, that's such a great idea because it also is not any kind of environment that they're not used to anymore. Like
No.
they know how to do that now. And I know for Natalie, her kids may have known how to do that before because I know they had devices, but for a lot of students, these are all new skills that they've learned because they
Mhm.
didn't have these devices before. Um, we had another comment, from Linda Markley. Hey, Linda. Um, she said, I think that world language teachers will become the role models for other subjects, showing how to more effectively and creatively communicate and connect with students. I do too. I
Yeah.
totally, I agree with that. She said, that's what we've done all along. And we have always tried to bring the outside world and other cultures into our classrooms and make it more real and more meaningful for our students. And I want to piggyback on what she's saying. One frustration for me sometimes was that we did want to do a lot of these things and we tried to do a lot of these things, but like you said, there were policies or there were structures in place that kept us from doing that now are just common practice because it was the only way to have school,
Hmm.
was to obliterate some of those obstacles that we had before.
Right, right. So
So
there
it's a
may
very
be,
good point.
I mean, there's a lot of diversity within the teaching ranks too, right? And I'm sure there are a lot of teachers who, as you said, they wanted to get those target language speakers in on Zoom or some kind of technology and so forth. I'm sure there are a lot of other teachers who have had to be dragged kicking and screaming into that,
Yes,
and that's
I'm
okay.
sure.
That's okay. And some that may be some of you who are listening, right? And
It's
there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, all of us have something that we're comfortable with and other things we're not comfortable with. You know, the whole COVID
mm-hmm,
thing has forced me to learn some programs and technologies that I was not comfortable with, right? I'm an old guy, right? Learning a new program is hard for me, right? So I had to do it. So and you don't have to don't obviously don't throw out the baby with the bathwater. There's probably a lot of good things that you can only do face to face with a group of
mm-hmm,
kids in a classroom, singing a song together, going on field trips. There's just stuff, hands on manipulatives, things like that that are great. You can only do that there. But now, think creatively. If you're one of those people who has been dragged kicking and screaming, think creatively a little bit. It wasn't all bad. Maybe it was 50% bad. Maybe it
mm-hmm.
was 80% horrible, but there's got to be something good in there. Yeah. And
Well, and
go ahead.
one of the things you just said just made me think too. So a few things that we've had to just have become part of the norm is have our collaborative planning be virtual.
Yes.
It has been to engage with our learners virtually. Um, it has blown a little bit up of the idea of seat time because what is seat time
Yeah.
anymore, right? Um, and so even if we go back to physical buildings 5 days a week with just some kids out, on a rolling basis, what's to say we couldn't take a lot of those same practices to then engage beyond the classroom learning,
Mhm.
like to have a partner teacher from one of the countries of study that you're collaboratively planning with and that you're bringing your classes together virtually for real authentic engagement
Yeah.
from afar in the same way you were doing it during COVID, but now you're just applying all those skill sets that you had to practice and use every day under
Yes.
duress.
Yes.
But now you're doing it for innovation and for creativity
Right.
instead. So
And
that really is a
those
way to
kids
kind
on
of flip that.
quarantine, the kids on quarantine, I hadn't thought of this, but I mean, what a great opportunity, right? Because that kid's got a lot of time on his or her hands. They're not just not going to school. We hope they're not going to the mall. We hope they're not going out anywhere, right? So they're stuck at home. So you could say, okay, so next Wednesday, we would like you to give, contact so and so who's a speaker of French or Spanish, and we want you to introduce them to the rest of the class. So you do that part asynchronously, then log on and say, the person I talked to was Maria Espinoza, and she da 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 da, and here's what she does, and here's what her family does, and everything. So you're
Mhm.
using, again, that crisis, the kids, exposed to COVID, that's not a good thing. But let's use that rather than just, oh, we'll beam you into the classroom and you can watch what we're doing face to face, because the kid's going to snooze,
Yeah.
right? Yeah.
So, and that's differentiating for them too. Like maybe they get to do something special since unfortunately they have to be quarantined for COVID. Um, they're still practicing their skills just in a different way than the rest of the classes too. Um,
And bringing something
and
special because again, they've got time on their hands, right? By definition, and
mhm,
go and find something and you become the expert. It doesn't have to be just an
mhm.
interview. It could be something you care about, I don't know, the Spanish soccer league or, fashion in Russia. I don't care.
So I know one question that I have is it goes back to a challenge that we've had for a long time, but it is somewhat around the idea of seat time, but it's also around the idea of students performing and demonstrating proficiency and what that means for going into higher ed after they graduate. Obviously, they can get the seal of biliteracy or the global seal, and that's an accreditation that they've demonstrated they can perform at a certain level. And it doesn't really matter where they learned it, if they learned it virtually or face to face or not at all at school or wherever it comes from. But how do we begin to advocate with our higher ed institutions, Carl, to in our own communities where maybe some higher ed institutions may be shifting their thinking and their prioritizing of how they look at students coming in now than they used to, but how can we advocate at K-12 to have a highlight on that so that our learners can promote and show what they can do and maybe not have to start back over when they get to higher ed?
So first of all, a little bit of a disclaimer. I fought tooth and nail for 25 years to change the system of higher education, and I had very little impact on it. It's one of the most conservative institutions in the entire United States. On the other hand, this crisis has, if anything, hit universities harder in a way than the K-12 system because it's hit in their
Mm-hmm.
pocketbook, right? And students are, in the midst of the pandemic are going, I wanted a college experience. I wanted to go to football games and join a fraternity. And now why would I be paying 10, 15, $20,000 a year to sit in my room and listen to lectures, which I could have done
Right,
at home or in an apartment somewhere, right? So
exactly.
even when the whatever over looks like, right? I think a lot of parents and a lot of students are going to be reevaluating that value proposition and say, I'm
Mm-hmm.
not sure I do want to pay $15,000, $20,000 to have that, right? So
Mm-hmm.
universities are going to be,
I'm thinking about that. I have one coming up
yeah,
myself. I know I'm thinking about it.
yeah. A lot of there's going
Mm-hmm.
to be a lot of economic pressure on universities because they have to get butts in the seat to stay solvent, right? So if
Mm-hmm.
I can't tell you exactly how because every university has its own politics, but this is the time to say, hey, chairman of the foreign languages department, I'll bet you don't want your program eliminated because there aren't students, enough kids coming and paying tuition. Here's a way you can get not only high performing kids who went through traditional programs, you can get heritage speakers. So you're meeting your
Mm.
diversity goals, and yes, you're going to
It
have to,
opens doors. It opens the doors to so many more populations.
where before they would have said, oh, we couldn't possibly let anybody into, third year French who hasn't learned the passé composé the way that Madame whatever taught it. Okay, if ever they're going to be primed for a pitch to think differently, now is the time.
Mm-hmm.
And
Absolutely.
I don't
I
shame
think
them.
it's well, it's something to think about, and maybe if we all are singing the same song jointly together, we can create change in that avenue too, because that would give so many of our students opportunities that maybe they might not have pursued continuing their language learning because of the obstacles or the challenges they would face.
Right.
I have some other really good comments in here. I just want you to be able to hear. And some of these, you guys, some of these I can't see anymore because they've gone off of my screen and I can't make it show up for me. So some of you guys I missed. Elena Bibic is a French teacher, and one of the comments that she had was how she's now able to also really see and engage with her students' emotions because she sees their faces all in front of her so clearly and connecting with them. And that's a good point. I think it's sad sometimes that students aren't required to show their cameras, although I certainly understand why they may not be required to show their cameras. But I do think that building relationships with them is going to be essential to be able to connect with them face to face. Angela Davila also says, she said, as Carl says, some of the best world language teachers have been forced to use new technology that was not comfortable for them before. Oh my goodness. And her comment just disappeared for me. So we'll have to go back in and find that. when I click on the comments, I can only see so many at a time and also see Carl at the same time. So,
No, you don't have to see me.
um, um, but I know Natalie also agrees with Helena that it's good to see their faces. Um, and sometimes to be able to use body language in the classroom is more effective and impactful because you can move around and act and do all these things. But I will say I have seen some video of some teachers who have basically set up studios in their homes to be able to do this. And some teachers are also broadcasting to their students from their classrooms. But it's hard. We face challenges with masks now
Yeah,
too.
yeah,
And
yeah.
being able to see the facial expressions and lips and mouth and all
Something
of
else
that as
that
well is a challenge.
I've heard from some colleagues in the classroom have said, I really cherish being able to hear from the introverts as much
Mm,
as the vocal kids. And you know what it's like in a classroom. Some kids are always raising their hand and grabbing the floor and getting it right. It's harder to do that on Zoom. And so
yeah.
you can, you can ask people again to put something in the chat. A kid who might not feel comfortable
Mhm,
speaking can put something up
mhm.
in the chat or post a picture that relates to some cultural point or something. So I hope that's something we take back into our classrooms with us, is that appreciation of those quiet kids, sitting in the back for whatever reason, whether it's because
Mhm.
they're confused, they're just shy, something's going on at home. Let's remember those kids and how much we heard from them, over Zoom, and it would be good to keep hearing from them once we're back face to face.
Absolutely. And I know some practices that are strong instructional practices in the classroom translate very well. We have to modify them, but the use of protocols for activities or having things that are just systematic and how you're not only calling on or attending to the kids you can see, but that there's just a process and kids just know, well, oh, well, we're doing this and everyone has to do it. Like we all
Yes.
have to put something in the chat,
Yes.
there's no outs for anyone. Those are things that we try to encourage to see happening in classrooms, but that with a little bit of tweaking, you can also do virtually. And when things go back to hybrid or even face to face, continuing that practice so
Yeah.
that you don't end up back calling on the kids that are wiggling in their seats, raising their hands all the time, but that you're using those practices so that everyone is involved.
Yeah. And I would add, one of the things that works really well, again, whether it's a chat function or when you post things and so forth, it's sometimes introversion has to do with just a personality. Sometimes it's a cognitive style. And some of us like to hear something and then say, "Oh, that reminds me of something." Others have to sit back and process, right?
Mm-hmm.
So seeing that happen online, where the kid who is so quiet would never give an opinion, but writes this very nice little piece if you give them 5 minutes to think about it. Well, let's remember that when we get back into the classroom. Yeah, we're not going to hear from
Yeah.
that kid if we say, "Okay, what's the answer to number 7?" Boom, and they're going like, "I don't know. That makes me uncomfortable." Let's have more of those
Mm-hmm.
activities where those
Mm-hmm.
more reflective, contemplative kids have a chance to show what they can do.
In different ways, just different ways to be able to show what they can do. Like maybe
Yeah,
it's through a chat for some, but maybe it's through, you know, speaking out for others, or it's being able to differentiate in different ways to engage
yeah,
the learners around the
yeah,
same activity.
exactly.
We have another question. So Angela says, I wonder how the actual 90% target language rule works as teachers are working in more Zoom type formats. And I don't know if some of you teachers out there that, especially you immersion teachers, you guys keep it in the language. Do you want to share some of the ideas or strategies you have? Um, I know one thing, Angela, that I can speak to myself is I was a distance learning teacher for many years. I think I taught distance learning on the side while I was also a coordinator and a teacher and working at the State Department. All during that time, I was also teaching distance learning. And I taught 100% in the language. And in some ways, the strategies I was able to use for visuals and resources and bringing in clips and video and things like that, that we weren't doing a whole lot of yet in the classroom, made it easier for me to stay in the language. I still had a camera facing me where I could act out everything. But being able to show visuals so that every student in the class could see that visual clearly. There wasn't a kid in the back of the room that was trying to figure out what that thing was that I was showing on the board. Everyone could see it equally the same. And so I think a lot of those strategies that teachers are using virtually, they will translate right into going back into the classroom. They work. It's a whole lot more prep on the front end. And I think most teachers have discovered that it's a whole lot more prep getting ready to teach that way and stay in the language in advance. But over time, you build a repertoire of resources to pull from that you can use. Let's see, we had some other questions as well. Let me see. Oh, goodness. So Anna, you may have to send me some of the comments. I know Crystal had a comment and I can't see Crystal's comment anymore. Oh, wait, here we go. Crystal's comment is, I started off this year teaching in person, and then I shifted to social learning, to distance learning. Now we're back in person, and now I'm teaching synchronously online to students sitting in classrooms from the same building. At this point, I don't know what I'm doing. There are challenges and benefits to all scenarios. Sound quality, masks. I've tried to stick with student engagement as the priority, regardless of the ever-shifting sands. Thank you for sharing, Crystal. And thank you for sticking with it. That is a lot.
I love that. It's like, regardless of what circumstance come, it's about student engagement. And I think if we keep coming back to that touchstone, and I have heard, some of my teacher friends complaining, I can't keep the kids engaged because they're not, well, probably, and I understand this is not a criticism, but yeah, you've been doing it one way for 20, 25, 30 years face to face. You've got to learn new strategies. But I think if you, especially in a language classroom, you keep coming back to, how do you keep kids talking? How do you keep kids writing? How do you keep in the target language? Creative teachers will find ways, and it sounds like Crystal has done so.
Yeah. I think I know I have just been amazed every time I talk to teachers and work with districts from my role at More Learning. The creativity, like I said, the engineering that's happening behind the scenes to make things keep going, the devotion and the compassion and the caring that we see, that's always been there in the hearts of our teachers. But the degree of commitment has just been mind-blowing and touching to see, even for the teachers of my kids. It's an enormous amount of work. It's been a very hard year for a lot of teachers. And coming up on the anniversary of this year, I do hope that teachers will feel empowered because they have come through fire, and hopefully it has forged steel, and that they're going to walk back into those classrooms stronger, more equipped and ready to face what comes next. And hopefully we can band together and make it even better. So.
Yes. Yeah. Well, I hope, from that teacher point of view, it's like, yes, you have done this impossible thing that none of us ever would have believed was possible. For those of you who are, supervisors, teacher trainers, that sort of thing, I would encourage you, probably, coming back to, I think Crystal said it really well. What did you do in the middle of all this that kept kids engaged? And, maybe there's a little time of what didn't work at all. Okay, but it's okay. So we do that. We set it aside. What worked to keep kids engaged? And what does this mean for us going forward? So rather than just like, whew, we lived through that. Now let's go back to exactly the way we were doing things.
Right. No, let's make it better. Let's take what we've learned and make it better.
Another point of departure, and getting right back to the beginning here, I told you the Winston Churchill quote, and in my language, Japanese, the word for crisis is kiki, okay? And the first character means basically crisis. The second means opportunity. So in that very vocabulary word it's both crisis and opportunity. And it's this recognition that it's when we're pushed to the limit, when we really have our backs to the wall, that, necessity is the mother of invention. And after that, that's when we
Mhm.
have a chance for innovation. That's when we have a chance for cultural flowering. And I sure hope that happens with our field.
Oh, I do too, Carl.
Yes.
We have some giveaways to give. I can't even believe an hour has gone by. I think, we could we could talk for hours easily,
And
and we
we do
often do.
sometimes.
We often do. But I do want us to have time for the giveaway. So what we're going to do for the stamp giveaway. So we're giving away 5 stamp tests for educators who would like to use those results to go for the seal of biliteracy. So Carl, I don't know if you have a sticky note or a piece of paper or something that you can write a number on.
Yes,
If
I
you
do.
can pick a number between 1 and 100.
Okay.
Okay.
Got it.
And I'm going to ask our participants who want to try to go for this, if you guys will post in the chat the number that you pick, between 1 and 100. What we will do is the 5 numbers that are closest to the number that Carl chose will be the ones that get a stamp test. So Carl, when you are finished, we'll give people a chance to start plugging their numbers into the chat.
I'm right. I'm just making my sign. Is it low tech?
Okay. All right. We have a few numbers that are starting to pop in now. Keep them coming, you guys. And if we only have 5 entries, so far we have 3. So all you guys who are out there watching, plug your numbers in because you can maybe get a stamp test. And we also are going to give away 3 advanced licenses. And so if you have commented in our chat today and you have shared the live event and joined our Facebook group, please make sure that you fill out, Anna's going to post a link. Please make sure that you fill out that link, and we'll have a drawing based on those that did that. We'll go in and verify, make sure everything's there, and then we will draw from those that submitted for that, and we'll publish who those people are on the page. Okay. And if you already are a user of Advance, but you would like to gift it to a colleague, you can do that too. But we'll have to just get in touch with you about that so that we can get that set up for you guys. Okay, so Carl, would you like to reveal the grand revealing? Will you reveal the number that you chose? You can put it up in front of the screen. Oh, no, we can't see it.
There it goes.
There we go. Oh, hold it closer to you.
There we go.
There you go. 76. Awesome. So those are the 5 closest numbers to 76. We will be checking the chat and reaching out to you, or if you would, I guess I could reach out to you through your contact on Facebook. But if you see that you're super close to 76 and you have your number, if you want to use the link that Anna just put into the chat, that's the contact us at Avant More Learning. Fill that out and send it in, and then we will be in touch. If you are one of the winners, make sure you mark on there that you're one of the winners. Also, I am going to share some information with you just as we start to close off so that you can follow, so that when we have more events like this or we do more things that you'll be able to follow along. But before I do anything, I just want to thank you, Carl. Thank you so much for joining us today and for giving us your time and going live with us in our first live stream on Facebook.
Yeah.
You've always been a risk taker, and so thank you for jumping in that pool with me today. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
So I am going to share my screen with you guys. And so here you all can see, I hope you guys can see the right thing. I can't tell anymore what you can see. Let me actually.
It looks good.
Go back here. Okay. I don't know if you can see it or we'll see.
It looks good, Dawn.
I still see us on Facebook, but I'm not sure if it's showing.
It's
Hold
good. It's
on.
good. Whoop! Now it just disappeared. It was great for a
Okay.
while. Now you're good.
There we go. There we go. Okay. Now it's showing up. So these are just some links for you guys. Anna is going to be sharing these links again in the chat for you. So you'll be able to follow us, join us for more events. We have a lot of neat things planned for this spring and summer. We're going to be doing some more live streams. We're going to be having some webinars. We have a webinar that's going to be coming up in March, on March 24th with DECTFL, with the Delaware Foreign Language Teachers Association. So make sure you join us for that. And like I said, if you are going to be one of our winners, or you have a question for us or something you'd like to just connect with us about, please use this link. This is the avaanassessment.com/more-learning link. And that link, you'll be able to access information. We'll be able to get back with you if you join us for that. And that is all the time that we have for today. Thank you guys for joining us. We enjoyed it. It was so much fun. Thank you, Carl.
Thank
And
you.
I am going to close out, and we will see you on the next live stream.